Welcome to Productive Joy with Dr. Christie, where fun meets action.
Hi, friend. Welcome to Productive Joy. I am so honored that you're choosing to spend a little bit of time with us today, and we're going to have some fun. If you are not already following this podcast, do me a favor and hit subscribe. You can do that on Spotify. You can do that on YouTube. Because you know what? The good news is that we're going to bring you productive joy every single time. So I am privileged enough to have Steve Richman with me today. He's a speaker and a consultant. And fun fact, he has spoken in every single state in all of America, which is pretty cool. And more importantly, he's actually slept in every single state in all of America. He's spoken to over 500,000 professionals. And today he's going to be talking to us. So, Steve, welcome. We are so glad you're here.
I got to find some more fun facts than that. Yeah, I've hit all 50 states, but it's all business. I got to have a little more fun than just that.
Well, then you know what? Let me tee it up for you, because people usually have about a 30-second attention span before they're like, you know what? I don't want to listen to this one anymore. So you got 30 seconds to convince people that you're worth listening to. What would you say to them to get them to keep listening?
I say it to my kids all the time. I say, hey, we're going to be all right. You want to know why? Because we're the Richmonds, damn it. Okay. And that's the whole philosophy and the vibe that we have out there is we're all going to be okay because we are the Richmonds, damn it.
That's hilarious. Well, our McMullen motto is that McMullens are winners. So that's what we've said to our kids all along too. So, okay, well, we're going to be all right and we're going to be winners. So it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day.
I thank you though for having me on. I do appreciate that.
I am honored that you chose to say yes. I think this is going to be fun. So our paths crossed because my husband is in the mortgage industry and he had seen you, heard you, watched your kind of man on the street on LinkedIn and said, you know what, Christie, I think you two need to talk. So here we are. Why don't you
He's
tell
a
him?
groovy dude. I'm a fan of his.
You know what? I am too. He's a good man. He's a good man. I'm going to keep him. We're having our 25th wedding anniversary this year. So I guess it's stuck.
We had 30 in January.
Well done, sir. Well done. And you have kids?
Got two. One's 27. One is 19.
Oh, boy. So you spread them out a little bit. Boys, girls?
Things happen the way that they happen. What are you going to do?
True.
There's the lesson for the audience right there. We try and control everything. We try and get worried about everything. Productive joy. Things happen the way that they're going to happen. You can't control everything. You embrace it when it does happen and you go with it from there. Boom, we have a podcast. Let's
Solid advice. Solid advice for sure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your speaking? I mean, if you've spoken in all 50 states, clearly you have some things to say that people want to hear. What do you talk about? What sort of things do they learn from you, Steve?
I'm big on, I'm a philosophy guy. So just like what we just talked about, hey, we're going to be okay. Stop worrying so much. This is where we are. No matter what the topic, I have a little philosophy, a pithy phrase. I don't like cliches, but something that sort of quantifies it and qualifies it for where it's going to be. How I do it that I think is a little bit different than anybody else. I remember it was a while back. Yeah, I am an attorney. Who wants a hug? I love attorneys. Nobody does. So I remember I was running a company and I went with our head of HR to this meeting and it was about HR stuff. And it was all the lawyers up on the panel. And these were all the lawyers for the state, the big HR lawyers, employment lawyers. And they're talking and I tapped my HR rep on the shoulder and I said, do you have any idea what they're saying? She's like, no, I have no idea. I said, yeah, they're giving you case recitations. They're not figuring out how to make sense of it and how it's going to work for you. And one of the things that I say is what makes a doctor different, what makes a lawyer different, what makes a banker different, what makes a teacher different. We just speak a different language. Nobody's smarter than anybody else. I just use different words than you do so that you have to ask me to interpret it for you. And a speaker and a communicator, I think that's what we're constantly doing is we're helping other people interpret it in the manner in which we meant.
Yeah, gosh, there's power in those words because if people don't understand what you're saying, it really doesn't matter what you're saying because they don't get it. And I think sometimes we use big words to sound smart, and that actually really just loses your audience. So you have to make it relatable, right?
I think that's just the whole point. But think about anybody you want to do business with. I want somebody that's relatable. Think about you've been married for 25 years. Why? because you could relate to Jason.
Yeah.
That's why relatability, I think, is so critical. And in this world, we all want to come across that we're the smartest, that we're the expert, that we're this, we're that. We have AI, they can put fancy words behind it for us. And that authenticity, relatability, and sincerity, it goes a long way.
So how do you figure that out when you walk into a room, right? You're in a new state. Arkansas, you said, was the last one that you did to complete the cycle. So you walk in, these people don't know you. You are given the opportunity to speak to them. How do you instantly gain an audience willingness to listen through authenticity?
Well, back to the pithy phrase, I, I I am unapologetically myself. Okay, I'm a little bit goofy. I'm pretty sarcastic. I'm pretty high energy kind of guy. That does not mean that every presenter out there has to be high energy. This is who I am. There's a guy. His name's Doug Duncan. He's the chief economist for Fannie Mae. I go to conferences with him all the time. He's about as laid back, chill. He's from Minnesota, right? I hang on every word that he says, but boy, is his style totally different than what mine is. So I think when people see that you're really being you, that makes them listen. Because people say to me, "Oh, you're a speaker. I have to give a presentation in 2 weeks. Should I open with a joke?" Not if you're not funny, right? That's sort of right. But if you do and you lead with it, I watch these people, they try and lead with a joke and it just falls flat because they're not a funny person. And
Yeah.
then they, oh, should we listen to this person anymore? Probably not. So
No.
that's grab the audience is just really being you. And you got to be vulnerable to that. You
Yeah.
have to be vulnerable. Say, okay, this is who I am.
So it took me all 47 of my years to figure that out, that I have to authentically be me. I can't be anybody else. And so I call myself, well, I don't. Jason calls me a bold flavor. And I think that that's not always meant kindly. And well, not kindly, it's meant kindly. But the reality is, I am a bold flavor. And if I don't own it, then I come across as inauthentic. And that's exactly what you're saying, Steve, right? We have to be our best selves, the best version of ourselves, exactly as is. And add a little spice, because the spice is what makes people remember you, right?
So you said, I don't know how you said, I don't know where we're going to go with this. We've gone down that marriage path. Well, we went through COVID and my wife is not like me at all. I'm floating out here and she's on earth saying, come back down here. I'm like, no, come up here. Right. And we have that going on. And when COVID hit, I've been in every single state. I'm traveling. I used to do about 180 gigs a year. I mean, I was
Wow.
on the road. COVID hit. American Airlines and Hilton Hotels both called me to see if I was okay.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
how much of a traveler I was, right?
Wow.
But people started to call my wife and they would say, are you okay? Because he's alive. So you're spicy. I'm alive.
Yeah.
So this is who I am. And goes back to the next phraseology. You can totally be who you are, but then the next step to that is sometimes I can't change you, but I can change how I approach you.
Ooh.
So instead of the golden rule of doing to others as they wish to be, doing to others as you wish to be done unto, I say doing to others as they wish to be done unto.
That makes sense. So how do you know? How do you know what people are looking for out of you? Are you able to read an audience that well? I mean, you got 100 people in the room. You probably can't read them all. So how do you know?
People always say, wow, this is not what I was expecting on stage. You were like so quiet for the half hour before you got on stage and you just exploded. I am studying that audience left and right. The way that I start most of my presentations is I get up and I look at one person, I say, hey, what's your name? And they're like, oh my gosh. And it becomes, okay, we're going to be talking together. This isn't just somebody sitting up on stage. They're engaged. But when I'm sitting in that audience, I'm looking around. Who's the person who's talking to other people? Who's the person who's laughing? Who's the person who has a sunny disposition? That's the person that I'm jumping on at the beginning. The person, I'm not talking to that person for a while, right? I need the ice to melt around that
Yeah.
person. I absolutely study that person. The other one, I'm over that person now. So you said it took me 47 years to learn who you were and everything. You know who Mark Maron is? by any stretch?
No, tell me who Mark Maron is.
He has, I think it's the #1 comedian
Oh,
podcast.
okay. I'll have to give
I
it a
mean, Joe
listen.
Rogan has the #1
Sure.
podcast, right? It's called WTF. I hope we can say that.
I think everybody knows what that means. We don't have to define it for them.
Well, that's what it's called. It's called WTF with Mark Maron. And what he does is he interviews other comedians. Nobody's doing shtick. Nobody's doing stand-up and jokes. But they talk about communication and life. And I find it fascinating. One of the things, and I don't know if it was him or one of his guests that said it, they said, you know how you're sitting there, you got 100 people in the room, and you got the one person who's looking at you like, and you're like, I'm going to win that person over. And he goes, I finally realized not everybody's going to like me. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play to the 99 other people in this room that want to be here. And for that one person who doesn't want to be here, oh, well, sorry, you're not going to have a great hour.
Yeah.
And boom, that changed everything in my brain.
Yeah.
And just recently, I don't know you. I do look at Facebook. I do look, social media is important
It's
to me.
important.
I network with people. And somebody wrote something on Facebook and it really stuck with me. It was last week. It was, what comedian that everyone likes do you think is not funny? So I looked through it and there are comedians that but first off, why would you get one just to be negative to say, I don't like this person? But you're
Yeah.
answering but it wasn't just like, I don't like Will Ferrell. It was, I think Will Ferrell is an idiot. He's a horrible human being. I heard he did this. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So as much as you want everybody to like you, it's Will. Well, man, he's great. It's right. But nope, that person is compelled to tell you what's horrible about him. Not everyone's going to like you. And that's okay because there's a lot of people out there. You'll find that person.
Well, and what I hear is
Find your tribe. You'll find your tribe.
yeah, well, and yes, and the coalition of the willing is a real thing, right? Like, so looking for the people that are going to buy into you and who you are, I think there's so much power in those words. And I think the other thing that you bring up that is important that we pay attention to as leaders is perception is reality, right? And everybody comes with their own perception of what they're going to get out of something, what they're going to need from you. And all you can do is come to do the job that you were going to do and be honest about what you're there to do. And that will either determine, well, I didn't want that. So, okay, I'm not part of your world. Or, oh, I didn't even know I needed that. That's pretty great. So if you had to give advice to a leader who is trying to do things a little differently, and wanting to make sure that they are talking to the 99 and not the one, what would be the thing that you would tell them to focus on to get people to want to hear what you have to say?
Oh my gosh, there's like 12 things. So
Sure.
I say what those 12 things are, but the #1 is sincerity. You cannot do leadership by a checklist. So I used to work with a guy, and I'll say it was a guy. I won't say what his name is, but he'd be like, okay, we're going to have pizza today because somebody told him for leadership, you're supposed to break bread with others and be there for them. And he would walk in and he'd get the pizza and he'd go sit at a table by himself on his phone and not talk to, or on his computer and not laptop and not talk to anybody. I'm like, so the first thing you got to do is be sincere that I really care about other people. Anybody can come in my office. I have an open door policy. Nobody went in the door because everybody knew, no way. Second thing is, I love when people, this happens all the time. Well, why'd you ask me if you weren't going to listen to me? A leader has to say, I'm asking you, but that doesn't mean I'm going to follow exactly what you say. And you deserve to go back to that person and say, thank you so much for giving me this information. However, I'm going in this direction because give your reason why you're not going with what they said, but you still appreciated them giving that information. Then they know that you were listening and you did care as opposed to, well, I'm just going to do what I want anyway. Give them the explanation.
Yeah.
Those are 2. I got 2 more.
Okay, 2 more. So sincerity and listen and be honest.
And then I always say, and I ask you, what's the purpose of communication? Well, you probably know the purpose of communication because you're a doctor.
Oh, well, fancy. Purpose of communication is to get your point across or to get their point across to understand each other.
No.
Oh, no. What is it? What is it?
That's what most people say. it's to get your message out there. I say it's to get your message out there and have the other party interpret it in the manner in which you meant.
There's power in that.
Because
Okay,
we
so
get a
it's not
lot
just
of it.
saying it, it's
So when you
getting
have
people to
leadership, it's like,
understand.
we're doing this or da 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 da. Well, they're hearing what? They could be hearing, okay, so that means that my job's not important anymore. Or, okay, they didn't consider what I said. Or, oh, right? You have to make sure that they're interpreting it the manner in which you said. And in the lack of you trying to get your message out there, they will create their own message in their own head. And I'm telling you, and I guarantee you, that message is not going to be the message that you wanted out there. It's going to be negative. I call it the ladder to crazy town. So what happens is the minute that you're like, hey, they didn't tell us about this. You don't say, but I bet you that's all going to work out great. And they're thinking about me. You spin that out in a negative way in your own brain. And now you're the leader that didn't say anything. And now you're competing against the story that they made up in their own head
Yeah.
that you did not know about. So what do you need to do? You need to over communicate. You need to make sure that they interpret it in the manner in which you meant it. You need to be sincere in what you're saying. And you need to listen and give them reasoning that, yes, you do care about them.
Well,
There's
and
my
I hear that as controlling the narrative, right? Because people are going to make up the story, whatever that story may be, and we have a lot more influence than we realize. So I like to do it this way. I say, see this little teeny tiny hole, if you're watching, if you look through that, that's your sphere of control, right? Like that little bitty dot. But if you put your arms as wide as you can, that's your sphere of influence. And what I just heard from what you said is that we need to leverage our sphere of influence and recognize that the more clear we are with what we're trying to say, the more people will interpret it the way that it's meant to be interpreted, instead of making a bunch of assumptions and saying, of course they got it, I said it. But it doesn't work that way, does it?
See, you're the intelligent, educated doctor. You take the every kind of thing and you go, okay, here's the steps to make that happen. We have that done. I love it. You're the best.
Oh, well, and honestly, these are the things that I teach. So it makes really good sense to me. Everything that you're saying makes really good sense. And as somebody who is putting themselves out there and on stages all over, and I know you started in the mortgage industry, but you're kind of branching out of that as well, right? You are speaking to people about communication, about making sure they're getting their point across. I mean, as a lawyer, I feel like that is exactly what lawyers do, right? They get their point across and they are able to say what needs to be said to make sure people hear it right. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes, but the difference is a lawyer is doing it for advocacy purposes. But we're all trying to get our message out there and
Oh,
deliver
yeah.
it. Just think about a doctor for a second. Oh, they have horrible bedside manner. Well, okay, that's something that then we have to go work on. Think about a mortgage professional or a banker. Well, we have to be or a financial consultant. We need to make sure that they understand that which we're saying
Mhm.
because we're communicating with them.
Well, and I don't know, are you a Brené Brown fan? Have you ever listened to anything Brené
Oh,
Brown
I,
says?
I have such a professional crush on that woman. I mean, I'm just
Same.
like, oh my gosh, her whole worthy. It's funny because I said something before. I'm like, oh, that sounds just like Brene Brown. I must have got that from her. But the worthiness, and one of my favorite things that she ever has said is when you're not feeling that you are worthy, and this is what I think is a huge problem in this country right now, in business and very much in politics. If you don't think you're worthy, you state your opinion as fact.
Mm, mm.
And that's a big see, because when I state it's a fact, then it's irrefutable. If I say it's my opinion, then we can actually have a discussion about it. But there's no
True.
point, Mark, having a discussion or hearing the other side if you're stating it as a fact, because now it's done. You're dug in.
It's
So
true.
those who are willing to actually have that communication state things as an opinion. Those who don't state things as fact. And that comes from Abraham.
Gotta love a good Brené Brown quote. So the one that I was going to use is clear is kind, unclear is unkind, because that's really what you were saying with communication, right? If the goal of communication is to get somebody else to be able to say it the way you said it, the more clear we are, the kinder we're being. We have to say it in a way that people can actually remember. And it sounds like you do that quite well, sir. Well done.
Well, and that's the scary thing about leadership, because now are in a vulnerable position and you're saying, this is what I think, as opposed to, is anyone going to follow me if that's just my opinion? Doesn't it have to be a fact?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Interesting.
you try and puff yourself up by stating it a certain way. And when that doesn't come true, guess what ends up happening to your leadership? They'll doubt you even more.
Yeah, that's very true. Very, very true. So I'm going to take us in a slightly different direction because this is my favorite question to ask on this particular podcast. So it's called Productive Joy, and the purpose of the podcast is really just to help people help fun meet action, right? Like, so we need to be doing certain things, but they don't have to be mundane and terrible. They can actually be rather joyful. But everybody has a different definition of productive joy. I would love to hear yours. Steve, what's your definition of productive joy?
Well, you told me you were going to ask me that question. So listeners, oh, she doesn't know my answer, but I
Oh,
was told that question beforehand, and I really thought about it. And when I think productive joy, first let's talk joy.
mhm.
Joy and happiness, I think, are very similar. So I'm going to use those words synonymously. Okay. Joy and happiness. I know there's nuances between them, but I'm using them synonymously here.
Okay.
First, so we go productive, happiness, productive, joy. The first thing for productive is you have to produce. And I think as a speaker, as a business person, as a salesperson, I'm always trying to produce joy in my customer, in my audience. I know this. People, are you nervous? You spoke to over 500,000 people. I'm nervous every time I get on a stage. I'm nervous every time I meet somebody until, and you're doing it right there, doctor,
Mm.
you're smiling at me.
Yeah.
Until I get you to smile, until I get you, once I get you to smile or laugh, guess what happens? I've introduced joy or happiness. I've produced joy or happiness in you, and now I can connect with you. So my first part of productive joy is I need to produce that joy or that happiness in somebody else. But it's not produced, it's productive. You ever read the book Into the Wild? I have a feeling you have or seen them.
Yes, I have. It's been a long time though. So tell us about Into the Wild.
So basically, it's a story of a guy who says, I'm giving up on society. I'm going out to live in the wilds of Alaska on my own. He does end up perishing in Alaska on his own. And they find his diary. And these are all his learnings of being by himself. And to me, the most powerful one that was in there, his name's Chris McCandless. The most powerful one that he wrote down was happiness is only real when it's shared.
Mm.
And so if I can produce joy and then you do what? You go out and share that happiness. You share that joy with someone else, and now you make someone else happy. Or you go out and you're now more optimistic, you're upbeat, you got the adrenaline flowing, and you do something good for your customer. You do something good for your family member. You do for whoever. You become more productive through that joy and you share that joy. That is productive joy. So I say produce the joy and then multiply.
Oh, I love that. I love
That's
that.
my definition.
Well, and it sounds like that's truly what you do as a leader, as a speaker, as somebody who is willing to share your wisdom with others. You are producing joy so that it can multiply. And I am really glad that you have found your calling. How long did it take to figure that out? Because you didn't come out of the womb doing that and you went the lawyer route for school. So, how did you figure out that your gift was actually producing joy so that others can continue to produce it?
I always thought that my gift was speaking.
Mhm.
And I don't think I'm a funny person, but people always say, "Oh, on stage, you're really funny." It's a total different person than on one-on-one. It's really weird how that works. But that is why I went to law school. That's why I was a courtroom attorney for years because the communication part is what was really happening for me. So I did the communication and I was like, but I don't like what I'm doing. So then I went in and then I started doing some business and then I started realizing, wait, I need to help the people that are working here at this company. I need to go into training and then training grew into more keynoting, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, and now that's I mean, now you said before COVID you were 180 days on the road. Are you back to 180 days on the road here in 2024?
No, that's why now I'm working for myself because I didn't want to be on the road 180 days more. It
That's a
was
lot, and work travel is not glamorous. Before we started, we were talking about my last trip and losing my suitcase and having to repurchase all the things that you need on a trip. The things you don't think about are sitting in your bag, like floss. Like everybody needs that for the day that they're gone. Anyway, so it isn't as glamorous. So you're not traveling as much. What are you doing instead?
oh, I'm trying to book traveling to get car, right? So before I had a sales crew, I was a national spokesperson for a company. So I had 60 sales reps across the United States of America that were
Gotcha.
to customers, and every day, like, this one wants you, Steve, that one wants you, Steve, go here, go there. Now I'm doing all of it on my own. I'm marketing myself. I'm selling myself. I'm creating the presentations by myself. So while I'm not traveling as much, there's a lot more office time that I'm
Yeah.
getting that stuff done.
Well, I have a feeling after listening to you for a little while that my listeners might be really interested in how to get in touch with you. How would they find you, Steve, if they wanted to say, "Hey, I need a little more Steve Richman in my life?"
Then you go to steverichman.com. It's basically that easy. But I got to tell you how it's spelled. It's Richman, Richman. Everybody thinks it's like Virginia. Nope. It's like, hey, what can we be when we grow up? I want to be a rich man. That's what the goal is. Just as a fun little story, there aren't many of relatives my name. My grandfather's name was Reichman, Reichman, and he was in America. And then Hitler came to power and they brought in the Third Reich. And he said, I don't want to be associated with that. And he went. So I'm only a second generation Richmond. He went to the courthouse and removed the E from our name. And that's how he became Rich Man.
That is a really cool story. So my brothers and I are first generation Finns. That was my maiden name because my father was in show business. Actually, it's his music that plays at the beginning and the end of this podcast. And the Mickey Finn show sounded a whole lot better than the Fred Sedgy show. Sedgy was his last name, Soetje. And so he didn't ever change it legally. Well, I shouldn't say ever. Eventually he did, but he didn't because he didn't want to disrespect his father. However, when he named my brothers and I, he just put Finn on our birth certificate. So we became Finns because he decided we'd become Finns rather than giving us the Sedgy name. So just kind of fun. Names are fun.
My daughter's Isabel. My wife's grandmother's name was named Belle, and my grandfather's name was Isidore. So she's
Okay.
Isabel.
Isabel.
Both families happy. We're good to go.
That is a really cool story. Very, very cool. Well, I have a couple rapid fire questions for you that are going to kind of take us in our final direction before we let you go. Okay. Are you ready? Are you
Rock
excited?
and roll. Yeah,
You're
man.
excited. I can tell. Okay. So, Steve, I want to know what your definition of fun is.
Laughter. If I'm laughing, I'm having fun. You cannot laugh and not be happy and not have fun.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Have you ever tried to laugh without smiling? It is a pretty hysterical practice. You should try it sometime.
No, but you can't sneeze while you're laughing, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh, that sounds like a mess. Okay. How do you know that you're showing up as your authentic self?
I can sit outside because I've never met anybody like me,
Mm,
and I deliver who I am, and people all, like I said, I'm a lot.
mhm. I
And
get it. I am
so
too.
that's how I know it is because boom, they know that, okay, that's Steve. I don't fake it.
Yeah.
Makes it
I
a
like
lot easier.
I like it. Okay. How do you channel your best self on your worst days?
I'm an energy guy, if you haven't figured that out here yet. And so on your worst day, you throw that much more energy at it, and it just takes you right out of the bad day.
Mm,
Go exercise. If you exercise, that's expending energy. When you're down and you're having the dumps, go for a walk, go for a run, go expend some energy. When you get energy revitalizes you, and
mhm.
expending energy energizes you. I say to my kids, I'm like, okay, you know how you stop being a procrastinator? If you're busy people don't have time to procrastinate.
That's
And
so
if you're
true.
down in the dumps, you know how you get out of the dumps? Have more energy because energetic people won't be down in the dumps.
You know what? That sound advice. Very sound advice. I like it. Okay, last question. How if people can't remember anything but one thing, they can remember one thing about this podcast. What's the one thing that you really want them to remember about the last 30 minutes?
You got to be yourself
Mm,
and stop worrying about, am I in the right place? Did I make the right decision? Well, Steve, you used to be an attorney and now you're doing this. Is that the right decision? It's irrelevant if it's the right decision or not, because guess what? This is who I am and this is where I am. So it's all about where am I going with who I am today? Whatever happened last year or 10 years ago is irrelevant to any of that. This is where I am. My decisions got me to here. I'm me. Let's move forward.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being willing to spend your time with us today. And listeners, thank you for sticking it out with us and learning a little something about being your authentic self, about choosing excellence in this space. And by this space, I mean wherever you are, because what Steve just said is true. You've got to bloom where you're planted. And so if you're enjoying this, make sure you're following. That is super helpful. And we really hope that you have one or two nuggets of wisdom so that you can figure out how to turn fun into action.